I gave a introduction to the area of this transaction processing and error recovery. So we looked at what exactly is a transaction, and then what are the various responsibilities of the programmers involved, what are the important properties, the atomicity, consistency, isolation and durability properties of the transaction systems in general, and then which of these things is the responsibility of what subsystem of the system. So we looked at all that. So today we will focus first on the issue of managing concurrency appropriately. Okay. So concurrency is an important aspect. We have to allow these multiple processes of this. Each process is a invocation of one of these transaction programs. So multiple processes to run concurrently, and in this context, we should also ensure that the system maintains consistency of the database. So how does what are the various how do we approach this problem? How do we model it, and how do we look at what are the kind of solutions that are possible in this space? So we will broadly look at the concurrency control submodule today. So let me go over the last slide that we were looking at in the last lecture. Basically, we just said that the the database model for transaction processing is that we think of the database as consisting of several items, and each of these items is independently accessible, and then the transactions will ask for these items, modify them, and then write them back. Okay. So usually we make an assumption that this item, the granularity of this item is that it's a block or a page, and then transactions only operate by exchanging data with the database server only. They don't exchange messages between them, and we will focus on the read, write, commit and abort operations. We looked at commit and abort operations in the last class. Briefly gave you as to what those things stand for, and we actually will not be able to at this stage not be able to fully appreciate what should happen in commit and what should happen in abort unless we also study the recovery procedures. So we will come to that in the next week actually. Okay. And we also said that the transactions should not be nested. Okay. So with this background, let me go a little more closely at this operations of these transactions. So let us develop some notation for representing these things. So Ri of x, this symbol will stand for the read operation of transaction I. So since we are going to mix the operations of the transactions, several of them, a bunch of them together, and then start talking about them. So we need to distinguish between the various operations of each of these transactions. So we use this transaction number as a subscript for these operations. So R subscript I indicates that so the I is the transaction number, and the transaction is doing a read, and the DB item is X. So what exactly happens when you do a read X is that the disk block having this particular item X is copied to the buffer page from the disk if required. So it's possible that some other transaction has requested for the same item a little earlier, and so the page is actually lying on the memory, in the memory. Okay. So if it is required, it will be brought from the disk to the buffer space. So copied to the buffer pages. So we will think of the buffer as something which has a number of these pages which are all equivalent to the disk block size. So the disk box will be first brought into the buffer page, and then they will be made accessible to the transactions. And then the required value, whatever is the value, is assigned to some program variable X. So even though the page is brought, the entire information about page may not be actually used. So, whatever is required by the program, it will be assigned to X. Okay. So, the read is that, and then similarly WIX, I means again the transaction I. So, a particular transaction I is doing this write operation. So, it writes DB item X. So, again if you have to update the DB item X, so you need to have the disk block containing this item X. So, if it is required, if it is not already present in the buffer pages, then it has to be brought from the disk and then made available to the transaction. So, the transaction will update the buffer value using this program variable, whatever is the, we have some internal the program space is there. The program has its own memory space, right. So, it is maintaining some values as it is running in memory. So, those values will be transferred to these buffer pages and then they will be transferred back to the disk. So, when you do a write, the transfer of the block to the disk might happen immediately or might happen later. So, this actually depends on the kind of recovery protocol that we are going to adopt. So, for the moment we will think of it as the transfer of the block to the disk will happen at some later point of time, okay, either immediately or a little later it will happen. So, unless it happens, actually the write operation is not fully successful, you can see that. Okay. Okay, so that's right. And then we have C of I to say the transaction wants to commit. So, transaction commits and A of I to indicate that a transaction wants to abort. So, these are the transaction operations and we just thought of them as read, write, commit, abort in the earlier lecture, but now we are giving more detail to that. So, the transaction number comes as the subscript and the item that is actually being read or written comes inside the brackets. Okay. So, with this notation, we will be able to set up what is called a transaction, a schedule of transactions. Okay, we'll set up that. Okay. So, before we go into that, let's briefly discuss the need for concurrency control. I think we can actually intuitively feel the need for the concurrency control, because if multiple processors try to access the same item, then we know that there are problems. There are going to be problems. So, let's give some clarity to that. So these anomalies are the problems that are going to occur when you interleave operations of multiple transactions in an arbitrary way. It can be kind of classified into write-read anomalies or read-write anomalies or write-write anomalies. I will show you these things in a short while. So, write-read anomalies they are also called dirty reads in our context. In the context of databases, we call them as dirty reads. It becomes clear now why it is like. So, the transaction Ti, let's say T1 is in progress. So, it's updating values in a particular column, let's say. And then, so the system allows transaction T2 to kind of read a value X that has been already updated by T1, make use of that value, compute some other quantity and also finish. By finish, it says that I am committing and quitting. So, suppose the system allows this kind of a thing, then the transaction T1 is still in progress. So, after this entire T2 has read the value X and then make use of it and then finish, T1 for some reason might actually decide saying that no, I did a mistake in updating this X value, I will have to go back and then change it back to the original value. Notice that as a programmer, I have the I have the freedom to do many things with the database. So I might, programmatically decide at a later point of time that this have been some mistake, and so I might want to do a change back to the original value. Also, this might happen because due to some reason we detected that the transaction T1 is not following rules properly and things like that. The system itself might decide to roll back the operations of the transaction T1, in which case the value that it has changed has to be brought back to the original value. So in this context, what happens is that there is a write that happened and there is a read that happened, and there is a cancellation of the write that's happening. And so essentially what happened is that this T2 has read some dirty data. It is read some intermediate data, or it's also called dirty data because it's not correct data, and so got into trouble. Okay, actually about a solution for this issue, T2 actually might having read X, having made use of the X, it can also actually wait for a while, see what exactly happens to T1, and then decide to do whether to finish or not. Okay, so but without doing all such kind of things, T2 in a hurry has updated and claimed that it has completed its work and quits. And suppose the system allows this, then this kind of a dirty read problem will arise. So this is a dirty read kind of situation. It's called like that. It's an anomalous situation. We would like to avoid that. Here are the other kind of unrepeatable reads. We call them as unrepeatable reads. So this is a read-write anomaly. So T1 has read a value X and intends to actually read it again before changing it. Between these two reads of X by the transaction T1, some other transaction T2 reads X, modifies it and finishes, quits. So when T1 reads the value of X the second time, it gets a different value. So the read that you have done is not a repeatable read. That means you get two different values when you read the same thing without you updating it. That means somebody else has interfered into your work, basically, right? So you read a very item from the database, and then you again read it. You haven't modified it yourself, and you try to read it after a little while. You expect the same value to be there because you are guaranteed isolation. Alright, but that doesn't happen here because something else has come and then changed it. So this kind of an issue again is because the system allowed T2 to read X without bothering about what is happening to it. So this kind of a thing is what is called unrepeatable read problem, and it causes a lot of issues, and so we should try and avoid this kind of situations. So all this actually is happening because two transactions are trying to access the same database item in some order or the other. This problem called WW anomaly or lost update problem, it's also called lost update problem, also happens in a kind of a similar way. So T1 reads an item X and reduces by 10% and wants to write it. It has not yet written it. Okay, it has done a 10% reduction, but it has not yet written it. T2 reads the same value X. T2 reads the same value X before it was actually updated by X. That means the same original value X, and increments it by 20%, and it wants to write. So T1 wants to increase it by reduce it by 10%, and T2 wants to increase the same value by 20%. Now both of them are attempting to write. So whichever write happens first will actually win. So, in some sense, so say write of T1 happens, then and after that the write of T2 happens, let us say. So, the final value is actually 1.2 times x only. So, whoever actually has written first has actually lost its update. You can see that. So, write of T1 happened and then that of T2 happened, but then the final value is what T2 wrote. So, what is the final whatever the value that was written by T1 was overwritten by T2, and so the update that was made by T1, which is a 10% reduction, was actually lost in the process. So, this issue is what is called a lost update problem. So, you might have actually studied these kind of issues in in processors trying to access memory variables simultaneously and things like that in an operating system course context also. So, and you would have seen this memory traces and things like that. Similar kind of issues come up there, right. Anyway, so these things are very real problems in the context of our transactions also, and basically these are the various things that we should avoid actually as when we are controlling the concurrency. Okay, so let's move ahead. Here is an important notation that we make use of in order to model the interleaved operations of a bunch of transactions. A bunch of transactions are currently running, kind of admitted, and they are all running. So, we want to take a peek into how they have actually happened. Okay, what is the exact interleaving of the operations of these transactions? So, we need a model for that. So, we need a notation for that. So, let's represent it like this. So, it is actually easier to view it in a tabular kind of form. So, time is progressing this way. These are the individual operations of the transaction T1. So, since they are in the column T1, we did not put the subscripts here. So, they are in the column T2. So, that means they are all of transaction T2. So, we do not put the subscripts. In a similar way, these are, and this is the timeline. You can see that in each timeline there is only one event, one operation, right. So, at any point of time there is a uniprocessor model. At any point of time one of these operations is happening. Okay. So, this is the interleaving of operations of transactions that is happening. Now, since each time writing this picture is difficult, so we have a notation for that. So, what we will do is we will write this as R1x, then the next thing is R2y, transaction 2 is reading y. So, R2y, then so next if you go to next time step is R3x. So, we write it R3x and then W1x, then W3x, and then finally W2y. So, we write this in this particular sequence and we call this as the transaction schedule or history of the transaction operation. So, we assume that there are a bunch of 3 transactions running, and this is the particular way in which the operations of the transactions are interleaved by the system and run by the system. So, we have a notation for that. Now, we use this notation to kind of study the properties of these schedules and then actually define what is a desirable property for the schedule, and then see how exactly that kind of schedules will actually happen in the system. Okay. So, this is just a notation for representing the histories of the running. It is also not fully complete because we have actually not put the commit commit operations of these transactions also. Okay. It is kind of incomplete. schedules. Now, in the context of these transaction histories or schedules, this is another important thing. We call something as a serial schedule. A serial schedule is where no such interleaving actually happens, no interleaving happens. So, all the operations of one particular transaction come together. In this case, they all come in one T1, T2, T3 in that order, but the order actually does not matter. You may put operations of T3 first and then operations of T1 first and then the operations of T2 also. So, as long as all the operations of a particular transaction all together in the schedule, we call such a schedule as a serial schedule. Essentially, it is operating. There is no interleaving, so we call such a serial schedule. Notice that we have discussed earlier, that if you have serial schedules, then there is no issue of any problems arising at all, because we are doing one transaction at a time essentially. There is no interleaving, but then the transaction throughput will be very slow, because you are kind of waiting for these reads, writes and disk operations to finish and all that. So, serial schedules are they do not pose any concurrency problems at all, but then they are practically not useful, because they will slow down the system. Okay, but here is a schedule notation for serial schedule. So, all the operations of the transaction, a particular transaction all together. Okay. Okay, so here comes a very important new term called serializability. If you type it in Word, it will give you spelling error actually. We use this term often in database context. This is called serializability. Serializability is defined a little later. So, right now, okay. So, serial schedules, we have seen that there are no interleaving of operations of different transactions, and they do not cause concurrency problems, but then the performance is low. A question arises is that, is there some interleaving of these all these operations, which in some sense equivalent to a serial schedule. Okay, if the interleaving actually happens, but somehow that interleaving is in some sense equivalent to a serial schedule. If such a thing can be set up, then we will call such things as serializable schedules. They are not actually serial schedules, but then they are in some sense equivalent to serial schedules. So, we will call such kind of schedules a serializable schedule. And if we somehow can realize these serializable schedules in practice, then we are a little better off compared to having to use serial schedules. Okay. So, what is this sense of equivalence? That is what we will now define and set up. So, the effect of this interleaving is same as that of some serial schedule. If that is the case, we will call them as serializable schedules. So, but this one is vague, because we have not really told as to what is that equivalence and things like that. So, let me make this a bit much more precise now. Okay. Now, in order to make this precise, we need to have a definition calling what are called conflicting pairs of operations. What are conflicting pairs of operations within a schedule? Because it is all these conflicting pairs of operations that are going to actually cause problems for us. So, let us set them up and then discuss them how to handle them. So, a pair of operations in the schedule. Okay. So, there is this this kind of schedule, right? So, we are picking up some pair of operations, and they are said to be in conflict if the operations belong to two different transactions. Operations belong to two different transactions. Both the operations are dealing with the same database item, and one of them is a write operation. This is precisely the kind of pairs of problems, pairs of operations that are actually was causing a lot of these issues like the lost update problems and repeat all those problems. Okay. So let me show you in this schedule. Let's identify the conflicting pairs of operations. So this transaction T2 is actually all dealing with Y, whereas T1 and T3 are dealing with X. So T2 operations actually don't conflict with anybody because they don't share the same database item, right? That's clear, right? So T1 operations, of course, any of the operations of the transaction don't conflict to themselves. They are in the sequence order. They are all. So Trx conflicts with, it doesn't conflict with this Rx because both of them are read operations. One of them has to be a write operation. So Rx conflicts with Wx. You can see Rx conflicts with Wx, and this Rx conflicts with that Wx because they are both referring to the same item. One of them is write operation. They belong to two different transactions. Same is the case with this Wx and this. There are three pairs of conflicting operations here in this particular schedule. So, given any schedule, you will be able to figure out as to what are the conflicting pairs of operations there. Okay, is that clear as to what are conflicting pairs of operations? Let me repeat. There are operations that belong to two different transactions, both of them dealing with the same database item, and one of them is a write operation. Okay, so now that we have understood what are conflicting pairs of operations, we are in a position to define a notion of equivalence. This notion of equivalence is specifically called conflict equivalence because it focuses on a certain aspect. So, it is called conflict equivalence, not a general equivalence. It is called conflict equivalence. So, a schedule S1, now we give names for these schedules because we have to talk about multiple schedules and then see which are desirable, which are not desirable, etc. So, schedule S1 is said to be conflict equivalent to some schedule S2 if the relative order among any pair of conflicting operations is actually the same in both S1 as well in S2. So, you are having two schedules and then you focus on this conflicting pairs of operations. Each conflicting pair of operations will have certain one read occurring and write occurring and things like that. So, you look at them. If the conflicting pair occurs in the same order in both S1 and S2 for all of those conflicting pairs, then we call them as conflict equivalent. Okay, let me show you an example. Let us take the same schedule. So, this is what is there. So, R1X, this is what is there in the table. R1, R2, R3, W3, W2, W2Y, finally W2. Now, this is conflict equivalent to this one. You can notice that if you take this the yellow ones, there is a conflicting pair of operation. R1x, W3x, R1x, W3x. They are occurring in the same order in here and also here. And in a similar way, if you take this violet ones, R3x, W1x, they are also occurring in the same order, R3x, W1x. Okay. And then if you take this underlined one, R3x and W3x, that is the, there's some issue here, right? Yeah, I think there's some, one of them subscript has to be corrected. So let's look at all the three. So, so this R1x, W3x, they are in the same order, and then this R3, W3, R3, W3, R3, W3, and so, and this one finally W1x and W3x. So okay, W1x and W3x. Okay, even these are actually in the same order. Okay. Now, that's so what exactly happened between this and this? What we just did is to actually position this W2y little inside. So W2y, we kind of pushed it up, pushed it to this position, and then pushed these two operations down in the same order. Okay, and we got a schedule. We got a slight different schedule, but then it is equivalent to the conflict equivalent to the upper schedule, whatever it is. Now, if you do something similar, but if you change the order among these conflicting pairs of operations, obviously you will not have conflict equivalence. Okay. So now I have done something like this. So simply swapped. What is it that got swapped here? You can just see R1x, R2y. So W3 and W1x compared to this, I swapped them and got into a different schedule. So this obviously is not equivalent to the other one, conflict equivalent to the other one, because you can see that yeah, in this, for this conflicting pair of operations, the relative order in which they are occurring is different in both these things. Okay. Now, why is this useful? What is this use of this conflict equivalence? Let's see. Now, our idea here is that having developed this notion of equivalence, kind of make use of it to say that, okay, if there is some schedule, if it is conflict equivalent to a serial schedule, some serial schedule, if it is equivalent, conflict equivalent to some serial schedule, then it's going to be useful for us. Okay. So that's why we bring in a specific notion of serializability. The serializability is a bit more general notion, saying that it is useful for it is useful for realizing good concurrency control. But here is a more specific property called conflict serializability. So we define some schedule as conflict serializable schedule. Okay, if it is conflict equivalent to some serial schedule. And how many serial schedules are there? If there are some 10 number of transactions, there will be factorial 10 number of serial schedules, because you can position them in factorial 10 number of different ways. Okay. So depending on how you position them, those payloads will finish at different times and all that. But we are not concerned much about when they finish, but we are concerned about when our correctness and all that consistency and that. Okay. So what we are doing here is that now we are saying that interleaving of operations is okay as long as the particular interleaving that you have done is actually equivalent to some serial schedule. What is that equivalence notion? Conflict equivalence notion. So what does it mean? So in this particular schedule, which we are calling it as a conflict serializable schedule, the conflicting pairs of operations are actually occurring, in the same order as they are occurring in some serial schedule. So, in effect, the effect of this particular conflict serializable schedule is in some sense equivalent to that serial schedule to which it is conflict equivalent. So, that is what we are going to make use of. Okay. Another way in which we can actually define this conflict serializability is to say that if you focus on non-conflicting pairs of operations and then somehow move them, okay, so that the schedule in question becomes a serial schedule. Okay, let me illustrate that. Okay, so let us take this now this schedule in picture is definitely not conflict serializable, because what are the possibilities here to kind of realize conflict serializability? So, the question that we are asking is that, is this particular schedule conflict equivalent to some serial schedule? What are the serial schedules that are possible? So, I can put among the T1 and T2, I can either put all the operations of T1 before the operations of T3, okay, and the operations of T2 actually do not matter, because the T2 is all operating on Y and does not really conflict with anybody. So, I can put the operations of T2 all the way before or all the way later, etc., does not matter. Whereas, if you focus on the operations of T1 and T3, if you try and check if this particular schedule is conflict equivalent to a serial schedule in which T1 comes before T3, if you try to do that, then, so what does it mean? So, this Wx, okay, should come before this Rx, only then this T1's operations will be before the operations of T3 in that serial schedule, right. So, if you try making this particular schedule that is given in the picture conflict equivalent to a schedule in which the operations of T1 come before the operations of T3, then obviously this second pair will be out of order. This pair will be out of order, because they are right now here like this, Rx comes first and then Wx comes. But then if you are trying to put operations of T1 before the operations of T3, then the relative order among this pair will get disturbed. Okay. So, I can't try showing that this particular schedule is conflict equivalent to some schedule in which operations of T1 come first and then the operations of T3 come later. In a similar way, if you try to argue that T3 operations are, let me try to put before the operations of T1, okay, then also the other pairs will get disturbed. So, let us try, so trying to put T3 before T1, what it means is that I should actually bring this or I should take these things all the way up here, okay. If you try to take all these things all the way up here, then this pair and this pair will actually get disturbed, because you are trying to take this Wx all the way above. So, So, that is the only way you can realize a serial schedule involving T3's operations before the T1's operations. So, either way, and these are the only two possibilities, either T1 should come first or T3 should come, or T3 should come or T1 should come later. They are the only two possibilities, and in both possibilities we can see that this particular schedule that we are considering is not conflict equivalent to either of these two, and that is why this schedule is not a conflict serializable schedule. There is some inherent problem here. There is some inherent problem. You can actually feel that there is some kind of a cyclicity problem here. Okay. So, we will make that a little bit more concrete. Okay. Now, to illustrate the situation, a slightly better situation where we can realize conflicts serializability for this particular schedule, let me change it slightly. Okay. Let us focus on this example and then change it slightly. A slight change to our example. What is the change I have done is to simply swap these two operations, swap this and this. So, I put Rx here and Wx above. The same conflicting pairs of operations are occurring, but then you can actually immediately see, I suppose if you are following me, you will be able to immediately see that this particular schedule in which I have Rx, Ry, Wx, Rx, Wx, Wy is equivalent to, conflict equivalent to a schedule in which operations of T1 come before the operations of T3. In any schedule in which the operations of T1 come before the operations of T3, this is equivalent to that, and the operations of T2 do not matter. So, just by swapping these two things, we are able to show that this is indeed conflict equivalent. So, S2 is conflict equivalent to serial schedules. In fact, it is equivalent to all these serial schedules T1, T3, T2, T1, T2, T3, T2, T1, T3. Of course, it is not conflict equivalent to T3, T1, T2. It is not conflict equivalent to T3, T1, T2, because if you try to get T3, T1, T2, then you will basically, these are conflicting pairs of operations, you will actually all swap them all of them you will be trying to reverse, which is not possible because this is the order in which they have been given to us in the initial schedule. Okay, so this notion of conflict equivalence is a very important one. I hope you have understood the importance of. I hope you have understood the definition properly. So, the definition just says that focus on conflicting pairs of operations. The relative order in which they come should be the same in some serial schedule. It does not matter what serial schedule it is, but as long as that is a serial schedule, okay, then we call the given schedule as a conflict serializable schedule. Serializable. It is not a serial schedule, but it is serializable schedule. Okay. Now, you can also see that okay. So, if you focus on non-conflicting pairs of operations here, non-conflicting pairs of operations, for example, this Rx is not conflicting, this Ry and this Rx are not conflicting, etc. So, this Wy is actually not conflicting with anybody. So, what we can do is to swap it with this. So, this Wx comes down, this Wy will go up. That is what I mean by swapping. So, if you swap it, then the swapped schedule is actually conflict equivalent to the given schedule, that you can see, right. Suppose I do a one swap, I take this Wy here and then put Wx here. This Wy is not involved in any conflicting pair of operations, and so it does not disturb any relative order of any conflicting pairs of operations in the given schedule, and so it will be equivalent to the given schedule. Do you get me? Yeah. So, like that, as long as this does not conflict with the immediate operation to which I am swapping, I can actually swap it all the way up like this and continue to maintain equivalence of the schedule before and after swapping. Okay, do you get the point? So, like that, now you can see that I can actually swap Ry with this Rx. I can bring the Rx down and then take Ry up. It does not change the relative order of any conflicting operation. So, I will continue to be. So, what I can do is actually I can do many things like this. So, for example, I can take this Ry, swap it down all the way here. I can move it all the way down here because it is not conflicting with this. So, I can move this up and then this down, and it is not conflicting with this. So, I can move this down and this up, like that. I can actually swap it all the way there. Then what actually happens? So, you can see that this schedule has become a serial schedule. Why? All the operations of T1 coming, then the operations of T3 are coming. I have brought this down all the way here. So, operations of T2 are coming later. Okay. So, it has become equivalent to, it has been turned into an equivalent state. So, why I am telling all this is that one way of checking whether a given schedule is in fact equivalent to conflict equivalent to some conflict serializable, given schedule is conflict serializable, is to try and focus on non-conflicting pairs of operations within the schedule and swap them around to ensure that the given schedule can be turned into some convenient serial schedule. Okay. So, in this case actually you can later verify that you can turn this S2 into either T1 T3 T2 or T1 T2 T3 or T2 T1 T2. All these things you can do by just moving the non-conflicting pairs of operations or swapping. Okay. So, that is the notion of conflict equivalence. So, in order to actually check whether something is conflict equivalent or not, we can actually construct what is called a precedence graph of a schedule, precedence graph of a schedule. Okay, precedence graph is also called serialization graph. So, the nodes represent transactions here, and there is a directed arc from the Ti to Tj. If an operation of Ti precedes the operation of Tj in the schedule, precedes means comes before and conflicts with it, okay, and conflicts with it. If that is the case, we can put a arc. So, essentially we are actually again representing the conflicting pairs of operations by arcs, and then we can say that we can redefine this conflict serializability in terms of this precedence graph, saying that schedule S is conflict serializable if all of this precedence graph is acyclic. Okay. The precedence graph is acyclic, then we can define that the schedule is conflict serializable. In fact, you can see that the different topological sorts of that acyclic graph will give you equivalent schedule. So, I can show you the picture for these two. Just now we considered these two diagrams, right. So, you can take this diagram T1, T2, T3, this is the original diagram that I gave you, and this is the slightly modified diagram. So, we notice that this slightly modified diagram is actually conflict serializable, whereas the original was not conflict serializable. So, you can also check it by constructing the precedence graph here. So, the precedence graph here has T1, T2, T3 as the nodes representing the transactions, and now if there is a conflicting pair of operations and one precedes the other, then there is a arc from T1 to T3. You can verify that later in the definition. So, because of this, T1 to T3 arc comes into the picture. Now, because of this conflicting operations, and this precedes that, T3 precedes, the operations of T3 precedes that of T1. So, because of this arc comes into the picture. So, the cycle comes into the picture because of that, and T2 is of course happily independent. Whereas here you can see that because of this swap that we have done, all these things contribute to exactly one arc. There is a conflicting pair of operations, but this T1 precedes T3 in that. This also T1 precedes T3. And this also T1 precedes T3. And so it's actually all of them contribute to this arc, but that arc is like this. So you can see them. Okay. So using precedence graphs or serialization graphs, one can actually check whether a particular schedule is in fact serializable or not. So there are multiple ways of doing this serializability, conflict serializability check. One is by constructing the precedence graph. The other one is by checking whether it's actually equivalent to a serial schedule, and that you can do by actually swapping non-conflicting pairs of operations and then reducing the given schedule to some serial schedule. So these are the multiple ways in which you can check serializability.